Thank you. My name is Quentin Ring. I am Beyond Baroque's Executive Director, and we are here to celebrate and kick off the Los Angeles Institute for the Humanities 25th anniversary, which is this year. So very pleased to have everybody here. We've got a great lineup of readers for you tonight, and I think we're going to have a good time. Before we get started, though, I did want to say a few words about Beyond Baroque. I wanted to begin by acknowledging Beyond Baroque's presence here on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. We acknowledge the wrong done to these peoples through settler colonialism, genocidal practices, and the violent dispossession of their land. And as an arts organization, we are committed to uplifting Indigenous writers, communities, and their art. Say a few words about Beyond Baroque. So this is the Institute's 25th anniversary. This is Beyond Baroque's 55th anniversary this year. Yes. So we have a pretty big fall coming up. We are having a gala on October 21st to celebrate our 55th anniversary. We are honoring a huge number of folks from across generations who have helped build Beyond Baroque and the wider poetry and artistic communities of Los Angeles. We will, in fact, be honoring one of our readers tonight, Amy Gersler, with the special George Joy Smith Awards. We'll also be giving special recognitions to one of our alums, Amanda Gorman, to Ed Boucher, who's been a major supporter of ours, to our first artistic director, Jim Crusoe, and to several other folks as well. So please stay tuned for more information about it. I think the tickets are going on sale tomorrow, so we hope to have all of you back for that gala. But what we've done across those 55 years is supported and nurtured writing communities, and particularly poetry communities. We exist to nurture new writing, to build community, and just to present contemporary literature and art. We do that in a variety of ways. We have writing workshops, including our Wednesday night poetry workshop, which has been running continuously since 1969. Every Wednesday, a huge swath of folks in LA's poetry community have gone through that workshop. We have a Monday night fiction workshop as well. We have special intensive master classes sort of every month. And we have a reading and performance series right here in this theater pretty much every weekend. We do have some great programs coming up. Tomorrow we have, in celebration of the kickoff of Latinx Heritage Month, we have Latinx Heritage Month. We have poets in El Norte. It's got a great lineup. On Saturday online, we have a tribute to Harry Northrup, who's been part of Beyond Baroque since pretty much the very beginning. Great actor as well as a poet. He was in a number of Scorsese films over the years. And then on Sunday, we're very excited. You may have noticed the pictures and going in on the wall outside. We have a new exhibit, preview of a new exhibit called Where Is All the Affordable Housing Gone? This is a somewhat different project that we have been working on. Usually it's, most of our exhibits are fine art, paintings, that sort of thing. But this is a participatory community art project meant to document the loss of affordable housing in Venice, which both here in Venice and across Los Angeles is a huge driver in the homelessness crisis, particularly illegal evictions under the Ellis Act. And so all those pictures you can see on the wall are previously affordable housing that has been lost to the market through various landlord shenanigans and other illegal actions. The project director is here tonight as well, Judy Brampman. I'm sure she can tell you more about the project. But please come back on Sunday for the preview of that, and the full opening will be October 8th. I just want to say also, we very much depend on the support of our members. So if you are not a member of Beyond Baroque and would like to become one, it costs as little as $60. You can purchase a membership from Jimmy in the bookstore or online. It's a huge help to us. It helps keep many of our events for free. You get a discount on our workshops, a discount on the bookstore, and it just helps everything that we do. So that's about it for the Beyond Baroque infomercial. But what we are here to do, as I said, is celebrate the Los Angeles Institute for of the Humanities. And really to hear some wonderful writers. There's a really great lineup that we put together tonight. Unfortunately, the organizer of the program and one of our readers, Janice Littlejohn, has COVID, so she can't be here. So I'll be hosting instead, much to your loss. But nonetheless, we will go ahead. Just to say a little bit about the Institute, it is part of USC Dornsife, and it is a hub of cross-disciplinary exchange for the city of LA. It brings together academics, authors, historians, architects, artists, curators, journalists, and poets LAIH seeks to integrate intellectual life within the active civic life of the city and to reflect the diversity that is so palpably a hallmark of Southern California. That is a mouthful, but it is all true. So tonight we have with us Shook, we have Amy Gersler, we have Danzy Senna, we have Liz Brown, we have Sarah Shunlin Bynum, and we had outside as our DJ, Mark Frosty McNeil. And so I think we're just going to get into it. And we're going to be starting with Shook, who is a poet, translator, and editor whose work has spanned a wide range of languages and places. The opening sequence of their forthcoming book, Atlas Estelar, written in Spanish, recently appeared in Poetry. Their most recent translations include exiled Sudanese poet Al-Sadiq Al-Radi's A Friend's Kitchen, co-translated with Briar Bajalan, and Mexican experimentalist Mario Beatan's Kawabata, the travesty philosopher, the writer, and the fish. As a founder of Phony Media, Shook has edited award-winning translations from over 40 languages, many appearing in English for the first time. Shook formerly resided in Los Angeles, has moved to Northern California. We're very excited to have them back. Please welcome Shook.
Thank you, Quentin. It's a secret that I live so much of the time in Northern California. Don't tell the Los Angeles Institute for the Humanities, please. I'm going to start tonight reading a poem for the dawn. I had never written a poem for the dawn before I had a baby, and now I have a manuscript I'm working on called More Obads. This one begins with a couplet by the Brazilian concretist Oswald de Andrade. Roman Obad with Oswald de Andrade. Who won? The Babylonian Empire and the waiter with the sideburns. The mustache pulled it out in the 6th, sacks packed, handlebars curled, unfurling in perfect time to send the forkball home. Pubic hair staged its comeback when we rediscovered 80s Playboys just enough. 47% of professional translators agree that the word mullet is untranslatable, except into Italian. 83% of Italians think the Caesar's army could have taken Babylon, Augustus plopping grapes into his mouth, sprawled nude across the hanging gardens' lawns. Lost in Rome at dawn, drunk on jet lag, I pull the punk with the septum safety pin. Che importa? L'impero è l'impero. One of the things I love about LA is its literary history, and particularly the wide range of international poets who've lived here. People that we think of all the time, like Brecht, after whom these LA elegies are modeled, but also people like the Chilean Nobelist Mistral, who came here as the consul for Chile to recover from lung illness. There's a lot of them, a lot of international writers, a lot of writers who wrote in languages other than English, including Yiddish, Russian, Spanish, so many others. So these, again, after Brecht, are my LA elegies. 1. The city is a microwave at 50% power. Nothing pops with heat, but joggers ooze perfume. 2. The butt ends of AC units perch on window frames like fat robotic gargoyles, drip sweat onto the jasmine. 2 drunks sleep in the Triangle Park, sweat through coats 10 seasons old. They snore in shifts, guard shopping carts rich with the weekend's cans. 3. A sealed semi sits abandoned on a westbound highway shoulder. In its trailer, 40 corpses, children puckered like pale prunes. A pity, says the LA Times. Imagine their dreams. This one janitor, this one nanny, this one cook. Some other truck barrels toward LA with better ventilation. Some other corpses will soon send money home. 4. The sperm trees spew chlorine. The popsicle pusher chimes his bells. Buses slink like slugs down Sunset, and summer drones on for half the year. John and Gray, most of those poems were written on our old street, Vendome in Silver Lake. This poem was written for a celebration of Cervantes. I'm not sure why I was invited to write a poem celebrating Cervantes, but it paid £200 and I did it. And so it is after the relatively unknown and pretty bad sonnet by Cervantes called Muestra su ingenio, el que es pintor curioso. The Curious Painter. In Mexicali's evening heat, your boards thirst for gesso, acrylics dry in seconds, and no amount of tramadol will dull the wicked sun. You find your models framed in motel doorways, eye heels and legs in dingy lobbies, Oaxacan teens with kids back home, deported cachanillas saving up to try again. God must be an accomplished painter, Cervantes said. Or was it that the accomplished painter must be a god? I wonder, is it painting them that makes you feel that power? Or the way they follow you back toward the bed where you'll paint them, like they can smell the dollars in your wallet, or like it's love? I'm going to end with a couple pages from the book I'm finishing now, which Quentin mentioned, called Atlas Estelar, which I've written in Spanish. Not something I set out to do, but what happened, I think, because of the subject matter, more than anything, perhaps. And I'll read the section of the preface to the book about California, since that is what we're reading about tonight. And I'll read it first in Spanish and then in English. This preface to the book really sets the scene for an atlas of our southern desert. Dicen que el nombre de California viene del árabe, Jalifa. Dicen que nos llegó por medio de un poeta, Garci Rodríguez de Montalvo, que en el siglo XVI acuñó un variante de la palabra Jalifa para nombrar a una isla que inventó en una de sus novelas. Sabed que a la diestra mano de las Indias hubo una isla llamada California, mucho llegada a la parte del paraíso terrenal, la cual fue poblada de mujeres negras sin que algún varón entre ellas hubiese, que casi como las Amazonas. Dicen que los españoles, al verla por primera vez, pensaron que la península de Baja California era una isla rebosante de riquezas e infieles. Y aunque no es isla, aún se ahogan los niños que intentan cruzar el surco hambriento que la divide en dos. Dicen que es el cuerpo de agua más peligroso en todo el país, the All-American Canal. Dicen que ni un nadador olímpico podría ganarle a la corriente. y el canal es un cementerio demasiado efímero para cartografiar. Y en la fosa común del condado de Imperial, cientos de ladrillos conmemoran sus peregrinos vencidos. Cada do un dominó caído, cada sueño enterrado un astro extinguido, el cielo reseco del desierto, su único testigo. They say that the name California comes from the Arabic, Khalifa. They say that it came to us by means of a poet, Garci Rodriguez de Montalvo, who in the 16th century coined a variant of the word Khalifa to name an island he invented in one of his novels. They say that the Spanish, at seeing it for the first time, thought that the peninsula of Baja California was an island brimming with riches and infidels. And though it's not an island, children still drown, attempting to cross the hungry furrow that divides it in two. They say that it's the most dangerous body of water in the entire country, the All-American Canal. They say that not even an Olympic swimmer could beat the current. And the canal is a cemetery too ephemeral to map. In Imperial County's common grave, hundreds of bricks commemorate its defeated pilgrims. Each doe, a fallen domino, each buried dream, a snuffed-out star. The parched sky, their only witness. Thank you.
Thank you, Shook. That was fantastic. Our next reader is Amy Gersler, whose most recent book of poems is Index of Women. Her work has appeared in a variety of magazines and anthologies, including The New Yorker and the Paris Review. She is currently collaborating with composer, actor, and arranger Steve Gunderson on a musical. And she will also be the recipient of the 2023 George Drury Smith Award from Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center. Please welcome Amy Gersler.
I'm really happy to be reading with this group of cool writers under the auspices of both Beyond Baroque, a place that is dear to me and I think a cultural gem in the United States, and also under the auspices of the LA Institute of Humanities. And I hope that we can take 3 seconds and send Janice Littlejohn and her mom, who got COVID together and apparently can't take that strange drug that is available because of other reasons, some healing vibes, because having COVID sucks so bad. Okay, I'm going to read a few poems. I owe everybody an apology. When Janice invited me to be part of this august company, I said, I don't ever write anything about California or place or LA. She said, it doesn't matter. So we got some beautiful place poems just now from Shook, and now you will get completely dislocated poems. This one is about something that scared me in childhood, which was the tooth fairy. This is called Tooth Fairy Sonnet. It's from the point of view of the scary tooth fairy. I can't tolerate daylight, so I slip into the dim of kids' bedrooms at night, adorned with necklaces made of baby teeth. The color white makes me retch. I'd like to resign, become something other than a fang collector. I can fly, but only as a limp, boneless ghost, a spectral jellyfish with floating skirts, a marble quarry whirlwind. I smell of chalk dust, old dental records, ossuaries, loss, and skeletons cleaned of meat. My breath is a whiff of extinction. I have eyes like mustard seeds. No, I'm not pretty. To reach your world of porcelain drinking fountains and molar rotting caramels, I navigate a long winding tunnel each evening, parts of which are dark and parts of which are the hurt pink of a sore throat. This is called Adult Lullaby. Instead of reviewing every possible instance of your own and your loved one's wrongdoing, could you be grateful for the stale sourdough loaf that serves as your pillow tonight? This is not the right time to brood, what if I outlive those I love? And what if I don't? You will and you won't. Suspended between worlds like a spider rappelling down a silk filament spun from her gut. The web begins as liquid inside you, wide-eyed at 2 a.m. An hour your dead grow eloquent. Tonight they loom like a band of giants, lumbering past your bedroom window as you long for and dread your first sip of morning. So cheer up, wakeful one. Time to invent fresh gods to meet your new needs. Falling asleep is like coming onto shrooms. You have to be ready for a few hard hours of paranoia before it becomes beautiful. Okay, so speaking of shrooms, I recently saw the director's cut of Woodstock, which is war, and was inspired to attempt to write about that film. This is called Some of Us Never Got Over It. What were you fools trying to do back then? Hell if I know. Lay bare our exceptional animal talents? Drown in the sticky-fingered jizz of the 60s? Chase revelation as psychonauts always do? Maybe we aimed to swallow the sun, become the sum of all human knowledge. Infinite alternatives were blowing in the wind. Acid elongated our limbs. We mated and mated, grew extrasensory, swore we'd never end up like our parents. We'd wander the globe in flowing robes, maybe naked, seeking God's raw thoughts, which we'd smoke or let melt under our tongues. We'd unite with the cosmic mind via art films, patchouli oil, which I would be pleased never to smell again, loud music, frantic sex, and epidemic dance jags, during which many of us, including those now dead, flipped pills into each other's mouths like the beanbag toss at a carnival. I guess we hoped to win some kind of prize, world peace, true love, or a giant, huggable, fuzzy stuffed animal. Okay. In my neighborhood, where people really like to decorate their houses I live in Echo Park, and it's a great neighborhood for holiday decorations. And people have already started putting bats and Halloween shit on their houses. Witch heads and all kinds of cool things. So I got started on my witch poem. So this is its current incarnation. This is called My Witch. In winter, she wears a crown of whole cloves strung on a loop of fishing line. She turns people into statues by laughing at them. Her cat sleeps in a burnt cradle on silk pillows. She recognizes the value of adversity. Her hair smells like a fireplace and she has no eyebrows. Flowers bow down to her. As she disassembles and reassembles, she is an urgent, disheveled letter. Her gaze has held for centuries. Good books shed their petals in her lap. Her lap is a moral impasse since she is God's and the devil's bitch, since in her body they collaborate. Her heavy necklace of ambiguities does not weigh her down. She's a chainsaw ingenue who rents an attic room 20,000 leagues under the sea. She will bless your house and hasten the rain. Most of the time she sleeps on the floor. Birds perch on the tub's rim while she soaks her feet. She believes rum is a food group. She knows everything will disappear. She recites the old spells with new vigor. She doesn't judge the duplicity of the flesh. Her clothes grow on trees, as does her money. Sparrows nest in her rafters. She says, being civilized is overrated. She wears dark blue suede kitten heels and has long, disoriented hair. She floated past my 9th-story apartment window last night. Punished, she says, is how she often feels. That morning back in 3rd grade when she was elected Little Miss Batcave, the weather grew peculiar. Green clouds and a weird glow lit the sky. How frail, how puny we all are, she'll purr, and then, did you feel that? Did you feel the house shaking? She studies the sky as if listening. I may name a comet after her. Strengthen me that I may do her bidding. Okay, this is the last one, and it's in Janice's honor, a COVID poem. Or a pandemic confinement poem. It's called Night Herons, which is a much grubbier looking bird than the name would imply. But they're cool. Night herons. All day long you wring yourself out, work virtually, go nowhere, brain exclusively tuned to end times music, till twilight arrives, to fold you in blue pleats of evening. A flock of night herons flaps past across the sky or your mind. It's the same either way. Long closeted thoughts rise with them, winging out from daytime roosts to forage swamps and wetlands, to nest in groups. Black-crowned birds who croak like crows swoop low over mangroves. The whir of wings, real or imagined, blurs trivial things. Strange times songs declare doom looms. Everyone's muzzled, mired in dread. The future's not mutual, it's mute or dead. Everybody misses everybody. Try to write it out. The night herons seek what the sun will summon us to, a prayer to be spared after endless seeming exile. I shall be satisfied when I wake with thy likeness. The night herons keep flying towards a psalm's promise, towards all tomorrow's garlands. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Amy. That was lovely. Our next reader is Danzy Senna, whose internationally best-selling first novel, Caucasia, made her one of today's most timely and respected literary voices, consistently challenging our culture's defined states of race, class, and gender norms. Caucasia won the Stephen Crane Award for Best Fiction and the American Library Association's Alex Award. It has been translated into over a dozen languages. Recipient of a Whiting Writers Award, Senna is also the author of the novel Symptomatic, the memoir Where Did You Sleep Last Night, the story collection Are You Free, and her most recent novel New People, named the best book of the year by the New York Times Book Review, Time Magazine, NPR, Vogue, and The Root. She lives in Southern California, where she is a professor of English and creative writing at the University of Southern California. Her next novel is forthcoming in summer of 2024 from Riverhead Books. I'll also add that Danzy told me that she actually has childhood memories of coming here to Beyond Baroque back in the day. So that's what happens when you're 55 years old as an organization. Like, all these great writers come through at very early ages. So please welcome Danzy Senna, everyone.
Thank you so much, and I'm so happy to be here as an adult now. I'm like actually listening to the readings, whereas as a child, my mother she's a poet, and she would bring me to poetry readings, and my siblings and I would like make our Barbie dolls have sex in the back of the auditorium or reading space. So And I'm always happy to read and think about LA, where I've lived for 17 years now. And my new novel, which is coming out next summer, is set in LA. So this was a great opportunity. And it's called Untitled Mulatto Comedy. And it involves a novelist who is sort of at the end of her rope with writing literary fiction and is trying her hand at writing for television. And this is her attempting to get work writing for prestige television. And I'm just going to read a few pages from the middle of the novel when she's attempting this. And her name is Jane. The assistant who came to find Jane in the lobby had a perfect face, full lips, a pert round nose, high cheekbones, sloping eyes. Everything sat in balance on the canvas of her face, each feature at the right distance from the other. "You must be Jane," she said. "I'm Layla. We're so excited you could come today. Can I get you water, a coffee?" "Water is fine." Jane recalled a lecture she'd attended in college. The professor told the class that faces were beautiful not because they possessed features of any particular shape or mold. Faces, he said, were universally considered beautiful when they were symmetrical. After the class, Jane had gone to look at her own face in a compact mirror in the bathroom stall and saw that her face was deeply asymmetrical, some kind of Picasso-esque pairing. Jane suspected Layla, the assistant, was not originally named Layla. She guessed she was the child of immigrants. It wasn't just her skin color, which carried a depth and richness you didn't see in America every day. It was her smile, so eager and hopeful, and her voice with a hint of the valley. As Jane followed her down a long hallway, she played a round of forensics in her head. Nigerian-American princess, daughter of rich doctors who'd moved from their home in Lagos to La Jolla for grad school and decided to stay. A mother who became a cosmetic dermatologist. A father, the premier cardiologist on the West Coast. They must have sent Layla to prep school in La Jolla, maybe Torrey Pines, where, despite her perfect face, she was not noticed as pretty by the blue-eyed stoners who were her classmates. They'd reached the conference room at the end of the hall. "Sorry for the state of things," Layla said, leading Jane inside. "We moved in last week. Everything's just beginning." Boxes were piled in corners of the room, and the smell of fresh paint hung in the air. Nothing on the walls. Layla handed Jane a bottle, glass, blue, no label, and said the producer was on a call but would be there soon. Then she left Jane to wait alone in the conference room. Through the large window behind her was a view of the freeway in the distance. She stared out at its gray morass. Growing up in the East Coast, Jane had imagined California as mysterious, glamorous, sun-baked. She had not predicted this Los Angeles, antiseptic, asphalt, glitterless, and hard, or how much of Hollywood felt like an enormous ad agency. Still, she knew she was lucky to be here, lucky to have this meeting with this particular producer. She'd read about him last night on her laptop. Ghana Ford was his name. The ink was still fresh on his multi-million-dollar development deal with the network. According to the article Marianne's office had forwarded her, he had been brought on board to create diverse content. The profile depicted him as a family man as well as a giant of the small screen who was changing, quote, the current conversation about race, much as Norman Lear of All in the Family and the Jeffersons fame had held a lens to the fault lines of the culture back in the 70s. His new deal with the network was going to allow him to go places no black man had gone before. The photo that went along with the piece didn't align with the family man iconoclast visionary described in the article. They had dressed him like an old-school pimp in a zoot suit and a green overcoat, pointy white shoes, bell-bottoms. When Jane squinted at his face, she thought he looked slightly uncomfortable, leaning against the white Jaguar, hands in his pockets, grimacing. Lenny, her husband, beside her in bed, had leaned over to look at the screen. That's the fool you're meeting? He let them dress him up like a pimp. Pitiful. Jane had tried a little defensively to argue that the photo was ironic, that he was in on the joke. Never assume anything in Hollywood is ironic, Lenny said, rolling over and putting on his headphones to go back to his Japanese lesson. That's your first mistake. Fuck Lenny and his earnest platitudes. Fuck Lenny on his artistically pure high horse. She would not be here unless she needed to be. She would not be here if she had married a doctor. And yet, now, here she was. She couldn't believe she'd avoided this all so resolutely for years. But those quaint, novelistic days were over. Jane had been to 3 meetings already, with other producers, a short white guy named Jeff at a production studio in Culver City who wanted horror with a social justice edge, a blonde woman in mid-city named Allison who was interested in comedies about campus politics, a snappily dressed Korean-American woman also named Jane who was looking for female-centric content. The conversation she'd had with each of them had already faded into a blur of white noise in her head, pleasant but inconsequential. That, evidently, was what generals were like, getting to know you sessions. If you vibed, you vibed. If there was a spark, it might lead to something, a second meeting, a one-night stand, a marriage of the minds even. But like blind dates, most of these generals went nowhere. All you had to show for your time was a free bottle of ice-cold water. Jane's focus in all the meetings had been to try not to seem desperate, not to seem too Dickensian, not to mention the novel, the rapidly evaporating sabbatical, the child at home who needed help. None of the other producers had called for a second meeting. Her idea was possibly too vague, or maybe it was that, as Lenny insisted, she was too smart for these fools, and they had nothing to offer her, even as material. Could she take this bottle home with her? Or was it like a hotel bathrobe, something to be enjoyed but left behind for the next guest? She pulled out her phone to check her face. The makeup had not fixed everything. It had not balanced out what was fundamentally asymmetrical about her face, but she looked okay, as blank and poreless and presentable as could be expected. Just as she was putting the phone away, the door swung open. It was the man himself, dressed not like a pimp, but like a 45-year-old television producer with a 7-figure development deal at a major streaming network. Or maybe like an aging rap executive. In California, there was no difference. Large diamond stud in one ear, crisp white t-shirt, expensively torn jeans, bright high-tech sneakers. He looked slightly older than he had in the magazine spread, a little heavier, his face wearier. She could see what had been airbrushed out, the slight acne scars pocking his cheeks. He wasn't traditionally handsome, but he had one of those big, caricature-friendly faces that famous people often have. She would have recognized him in a restaurant, across a room, or in a car next to her in traffic. She would have pointed at him and said, "Oh my God, there's that guy, what's his name?" Because he wasn't quite famous enough that she'd remember. And Lenny would snort and say, "I have no idea who that is," and pretend not to recognize him even if he did. Jane stood up, flustered. "Hey," Ghana said, "have a seat. Thanks for coming in today." His voice was soft and scratchy, younger than she remembered. Layla followed behind, carrying a styrofoam container and a green smoothie in a plastic cup. Ghana sat down at the conference table and Layla placed them in front of him, along with a plastic fork and napkin. On the toilet last night, Jane had looked up his net worth, $75 million, according to the website she'd found. "Sorry to eat this in front of you," he said now with a bashful smile. "I'm just coming from my trainer and I'm starving." He opened the container and took his plastic fork and began to dive into a mass of pale gunk dotted with color, some kind of veggie egg white omelet from the looks of it. Watching him, Jane thought how all the things he'd brought into the room with him were things she'd like to have in her life, or at least in her vocabulary. Egg white omelet, green smoothie, trainer, assistant. Thank you.
Thank you, Danzy. Looking forward to the new book. Next up, we have Liz Brown, who is the author of Twilight Man, Love and Ruin in the Shadows of Hollywood, and the Clark Empire. Her writing has appeared in Book Forum, Elle Decor, London Review of Books, Los Angeles Times, New York Times Book Review, Slate, T Magazine, and elsewhere. Please welcome Liz Brown.
Thank you, Quentin, and thank you, Janice, in her absence. She's missed. I'm going to read about the LA Hall of Records. Has anyone been there? It was very instrumental in my book, Twilight Man, and I'm going to read about coming to LA. And I need to tell you a little bit about the book. It's about my great-grand-uncle, William Andrews Clark Jr., who came from a massive fortune made from copper, and he founded the LA Philharmonic, and he had a secret younger lover named Harrison Post, and it's about their life together, which was very glamorous and charmed in the 1920s, and then that all changed in 1934 when he died, and Harrison was supposed to inherit a substantial fortune, but his sister Gladys had him declared incompetent and started to liquidate all of it. So when I started researching the book, I thought I was reclaiming like a lost gay love story, but in fact it was a noir. So, all right. I was still living in Brooklyn when I got the call from Kathy Gordon at the LA Hall of Records saying they had a very large file, but I hadn't sent enough money to cover the copying charges. By then I'd made my travel plans to come to California. I was going to fly to LA first and visit the Clark Library and then head up to San Francisco. I told Kathy that I'd be in town in a couple weeks and I'd come in person to pick up the file. This would be my first time at the Hall of Records. Actually, it was my first time coming to LA by myself. All the other times we'd come together, my girlfriend and I. But this was my first time renting a car alone at LAX. My first time getting stuck in traffic on the 105. All of it was thrilling. My flight had landed in the early afternoon, and I drove from the airport straight downtown. I found a parking lot on Hill Street. In the coming years, I would realize it was wildly overpriced. But at that point, everything was still novel and exhilarating. Traffic, parking lots, parking lot attendants. Even the paper stub under the windshield wiper seemed like a party favor. I took a photo of the sign on the building that said Hall of Records. It looked like something out of Dragnet, something from another era. And I hadn't even stepped into the elevator yet, which was in a strange cement hut, a kind of above-ground bunker, all alone on the outdoor plaza. The scratched blue doors slid open, and it was like stepping into a 70s movie. Graffiti, old decals, strange smears. Like some place where Dirty Harry would have cornered a sweaty psychopath. I looked at the panel. I could only go down. I pressed a button and descended 2 levels below. The doors slid open to a dingy linoleum floor. I turned a corner and found a window for processing requests. The truth is, if she wants a boyfriend, she's going to have one of the clerks was saying to another, but I'm not going to say I allow it until they're juniors. Several people were ahead of me. I took a seat. After all the momentum it had taken to get on the plane at JFK and fly across the country, I was now in another time-space continuum, the government waiting room. I gave myself over to a mix of resignation and languor. I studied the tape scars on the wall. I listened to the plunk of coins in a vending machine. Through tinny overhead speakers came Don Henley's The Boys of Summer. The woman next to me sang along. I can see you, your brown skin shining in the sun. I didn't care, but
but my ex's new wife cares, another woman was saying. I just wanted the same last name as my kid. It's easier. So I told him, no, you do the paperwork. You pay the fee. A man in a wrinkled suit with a diamond stud in one ear strode to the front of the line. The clerks knew him. He knew how it all worked. Maybe he was a detective, like Elliot Gould in The Long Goodbye. Except he was too compact, too vigorous to resemble Gould's lanky, rumpled Philip Marlowe. This is a first-degree murder, the compact, vigorous man said. Do you have a copy of the deposition, the clerk asked? I could have drowsed in the institutional torpor all afternoon, eavesdropping, jotting down song lyrics, conflating actual people with fictional characters. But eventually I got to the front of the line and asked for Kathy Gordon, who I learned was in a different office. The archives were at the end of a dim hall lined with stacks of bankers' boxes that had been shrink-wrapped. I didn't know it yet, but I'd just walked past the room where Jack Nicholson rips a map out of a surveyor book in Chinatown. I think that God must have a sick sense of humor. Now Depeche Mode was coming through the speakers, and when I die, I expect to find him laughing. I walked through a metal detector into a high-ceilinged room. Here, a series of glass windows separated the waiting area from rows of metal stacks packed full of files. Against one wall was a row of microfilm machines. In the years to come, I'd discovered that I'd been lucky in my timing and in Kathy Gordon's willingness to photocopy a massive and ancient case file for a stranger in New York. Subsequent visits would require waiting in a line to submit a slip of paper to one clerk, then waiting for another to call my number and hand me a microfilm coil, and then trying to find a machine that actually worked, and so on. But that day there wasn't any wait. I stepped up to the window. Kathy Gordon appeared with a rubber-banded ream of paper. She walked with a slight limp. She asked about my flight. Her voice was scratchy. I was thinking about New York all day yesterday, she said. It was September 12th, 2012. I told her that the year before, the 10-year anniversary, there'd been an elaborate ceremony, but this year things had been subdued. The exchange filled me with a buoyant sense of goodwill, and I happily slid my credit card under the window and paid for the thick stack of papers, $150. Kathy was intrigued by my wallet, which is covered in gold mesh, an effect I sometimes refer to as Disco Butch. I didn't tell her that, but I did tell her that I'd found the wallet in a thrift store, and I babbled some more about the company that makes the metal mesh, and my heart was bursting, but that was another detail I didn't say out loud. And then I was back in the seedy elevator and back outside in the LA sunlight. In the overpriced parking lot, I stared down at the ream of paper in my hands. Number 144004, in the matter of the estate of Harrison Post. Under his name, someone had stamped the word incompetent, and I had another giddy swell. This was a surge of joy mixed with horror, joy that this strange lark of a quest was becoming more and more real, and horror at what the reality was. However, to be honest, at that moment, my joy was still bigger than my horror. The friends I was staying with weren't home yet, so I stopped at a coffee shop on Glendale Boulevard to kill time. All around me, people stared at screenplays on their laptops, and I was glad to feel separate with my weird stack of archival legal documents. I thumbed through the pages, giddy and amazed. Every time his name appeared, there it was, like a little tail, the word incompetent. On some forms, after his name was the word deceased, and it was crossed out, and someone had written incompetent above that. It was that close to death. He ceased to exist while remaining alive. But then there were still traces of him in the monthly expense reports that Gladys had submitted to the court. batteries for a flashlight, new tennis shoes, a haircut, the nurses' salaries. And then the list of books. His library had been auctioned off, and the buyers were names I knew. George Cukor bought Ronald Furbank's The Flower Beneath the Foot. Francis Marion bought a book of Greek epigrams. J.P. Getty bought Lady Chatterley's Lover, Little Dorrit, The Sun Also Rises, and The Life of Benvenuto Cellini. I started to feel sick. The joy was shrinking, my horror growing, as I stared at the looting of his library, his lover's library. My head still teeming with expenses, book titles, and dead tycoons, I packed up the papers and drove to my friend's home. It overlooked the 2 freeway and a ridge lined with palm trees. In the small garden under a Chinese elm, we drank beer and talked about ex-girlfriends. Dinner was skirt steak and zucchini. Afterward, exhausted from the travel and the discovery, I collapsed on a futon. At some point, I woke up in the dark. There were howls outside, and then there were howls in the next room. I had no idea where I was. I knew it wasn't home, but I knew I was safe. Even with all the howling, I was filled with an overwhelming sense of security, though still I had no idea where I was. Eventually, my mind sorted the situation. Los Angeles, coyotes outside, dogs inside, and I fell back to sleep. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. For our final reader for the evening, we have Sarah Shunlian Bynum, who is the author of 2 novels, Miss Hempel's Chronicles, finalist for the PEN Faulkner Award, and Madeline is Sleeping, a finalist for the National Book Award. Her story collection, Likes, was a finalist for the Story Prize and the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. Please, everyone, welcome Sarah Shunlian Bynum.
Thank you, Quentin, and I'm so happy to be here reading in this company, in this legendary space. And I am going to be reading from the beginning of a short story called The Burglar, and the story moves between 3 characters: the burglar, the homeowner, and then the homeowner's husband, who's a baby television writer. The burglar. He watches the second car back out of the driveway, and then he makes a slow lap around the block, careful not to step on the cracks in the sidewalk. From other houses come the sounds of dogs barking, and from other yards the noise of lawn mowers and leaf blowers. Construction is happening somewhere down the street. He walks up the driveway purposefully and pushes through the white wooden gate, a high gate that, he noticed yesterday, doesn't have a lock. Ecola, Orkin. Idling at the intersection, she can't remember for a moment the name of the company she is on her way home to meet. In the past week, 3 men came through the house, one after the other, wearing jumpsuits and slipping disposable booties over their shoes. 3 men on their hands and knees in the attic, creaking overhead, tapping inquisitively at the beams. After collecting all the estimates, she consulted with her husband, who had only this to say: "Trust your gut." "Oh, Greenleaf, that's the name. They cost the most, but she liked the man, and according to the literature, they use 100% organic materials." The husband is late to work. As the elevator carries him up to the offices, he is thinking about Emmett Byron Diggs, Attica inmate number 17864. Diggs will be the first innocent man to appear on the show. When the showrunner put him on the episode, he said, I don't want you to think that I'm asking you to write this one just because the character is black. And he replied, I don't think that. But now he is beginning to worry about what to do with Emmett Diggs. $2,175. This she remembers exactly. After the job is done, she will write out the entire amount, and the feel of the check tearing crisply along the perforated line will be a small, silly thing that pleases her. Thank you so much. For the first time since moving into the house, she is not worrying every minute about money. She is going to the gym again. She is washing her car on a regular basis. In her clean car, in her damp gym clothes, she drives through the bright blue morning, feeling calm. She's going to be right on time. He tips back in his chair and looks at the whiteboard where the story beats for Act 1 have been written in streaky black marker. They're only 2 days into breaking the Emmett Diggs episode. So far, the formula has been consistent. 1960s bad guy commits heinous crimes, winds up in solitary at Attica, travels through a rift in the space-time continuum, and pops up in present-day upstate New York, where he continues his crime spree until he is tracked down and apprehended by a top-secret team of special agents, which the network says they like, which has worked just fine until now. So why, on the first episode he's been assigned to write, are they trying something different? The backyard is a mess. Weeds up to his waist, cracked concrete. A tarp slung over a pile of stuff pushed up against the garage door. From the front, the house looked nice, neat, green lawn. Front door painted a glossy bright red. But back here it's different. Flattened cardboard boxes, dusty grill, plastic playhouse bleaching in the sun, shrunken lumps of shit all over the dead grass. He hesitates, then thinks of the cars that pulled out of the driveway. A Prius, a Mini Cooper. There will definitely be Apple gear inside. Episode 103, Frankie Sutton. A deadly bank robber returns from the past to take a half-dozen hostages at gunpoint during a holdup of the First Niagara Bank. Episode 104, Walter Buckley. The notorious loose cannon bomber plants a pipe bomb in the Buffalo field office of the FBI. Episode 107, Mark David Dixon. A serial child murderer kidnaps Special Agent O'Hare's nephew from a local playground and leaves the team a trail of taunting clues. And now, episode 110, Emmett Diggs. An innocent black man convicted for the grisly murder of his white fiancée emerges out of the ether and does what exactly? At the stop sign, she counts to 5. She doesn't want to get another ticket, and then waits a little more because there's Jessica, her neighbor, out walking Buster. She gives a tap on her horn and waves. Go ahead, cross the street. She isn't in any hurry, and she's preoccupied with a relaxing and anticipatory sort of arithmetic. How many more weeks before they can talk about getting some bids on the roof? Also, the kid needs a proper bookcase. The shelves in her room are starting to bow. The Voter-Smith family is ready to graduate from Swedish-designed particle board. They'll have to plan ahead for property taxes, due at the beginning of December. But if it all goes as it should, they won't have to ask her mother for help this year. And if, is even to think it, to jinx it? Her husband is superstitious about these things. If the show gets an order for 9 more episodes, maybe they can finally tackle the backyard. On one side of the board, possible backstories for Emmett Diggs. 1, an arthritic gardener's son, recently home from the army. 2, head chef in the kitchen of local country club. 3, member of the maintenance staff at Miss So-and-so's school. Behind each of these possibilities is the question, How does a black man in 1961 gain entry to the spaces where rich white girls live so that he can fall in love with one, get secretly engaged, and then be accused of murder when she is found dead, raped, and mutilated on a golf course? Another question, asked only by the husband and only in his head. How does a science fiction guy end up writing racial melodrama? Also, how do I write this character without making him seem like all the other decent, long-suffering, wrongly accused black men who have shown up on screen over the years? Spit. Spraying across the glass, the barking sudden and loud. A black dog at the back door lunging at him from the other side of the window in the door. It looks big, maybe 75 pounds. It looks from its light eyebrows as if it might have some Rottweiler mixed in. The door shakes when the dog launches itself, its nails scrabbling on the glass. Through the window, beyond the dog, he can see the washer and dryer. He can see sweatshirts and jackets hanging from hooks, cleaning supplies lined up along a shelf. Not too far from the back door to the shelf, the distance no more than the length of his arm outstretched. And the dog, now that he's had a minute to look at it, not as big as its bark makes it sound. We open on a couple, embracing in the dark. The grounds of a golf course roll away on all sides, the grass metallic in the moonlight. From nearby, the ticking of sprinklers, and farther off, mingled voices and the clink of silverware and glass, the warm commotion of a party. We push in on their faces, mouths locked, her skin almost ghostly against the darkness of his fingers, black stripes moving through the pale waves of her hair. The kissing deepens, their bodies pressed close, she reaching up to slip from her shoulder the fragile strap of her dress, but with a single touch, he stops her, his large hand over hers. Still kissing her, he cups her head lightly in his hands. Her eyes close, his open, a strangely empty gaze. In an instant, his grip tightens, his arms contracting, a sudden twist, the sickening crack of bone. He's broken her fucking neck. Off his glazed look, we cut to titles. Could that work? Lenny, the story editor, glances hopefully from the showrunner to the husband to the other writers sitting around the table. For the teaser? Only 2 blocks away from home, she feels her sense of well-being begin to sour around the edges. She's using half a personal day for this, and that's not including the hours she spent online, clicking back and forth between company websites and sifting through contradictory user reviews, followed by even more hours imprisoned in the house, waiting for the men to show up with their slip-on booties and clipboards and brochures. In her heart, she sees Slash, guitarist for Guns N' Roses, his pet boa constrictor draped across his bare shoulders, staring morosely at a puddle spreading at the foot of his sub-zero refrigerator. Years and years before, when asked by an interviewer how his life had changed since the success of Appetite for Destruction, I got this house, and my refrigerator is leaking all over the place, and I feel comfortable just leaving it that way. But I can't do that, because this is my house. The shock of the door flying open makes the dog skitter backward, but soon enough it's on him, snarling, his shirt in its teeth, its weight pulling him down. But look who's got hold of the Windex. So there. For a streak-free shine, right in the eyes, buddy. Who's scaring now? What sort of crimes are committed by an unjustly incarcerated man who's traveled through a rift in the space-time continuum? There's not much for our team of special agents to do if Attica inmate number 17864 pops up in present-day New York and spends his days being decent. Hence the episode's twist. Emmett Diggs is now a cold-blooded killer, hunting down women who resemble his dead fiancée and ritualistically murdering them in exactly the same way that she was killed on the golf course. The husband locks his gaze on the water bottle sitting in front of him so that his eyes don't start rolling involuntarily. Emmett Diggs, a saint and a predator. The husband can't look at Lenny right now, can't look at the whiteboard. He feels his insides slowly curdling. He's not going to win any NAACP Image Awards for this script, that's for sure. His first episode of network television, and he doesn't want his mom and dad to watch it. Thank you.
Another round of applause for Sarah and all of our readers, please. Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming. We do have books for sale in the bookstore from our authors. Please buy them. I'm sure they'd be happy to sign them. I think there's still some food and drink outside. Feel free to hang out and have a good time. Thanks so much for being here.